I think we've talked about this a little bit tonight, but I think as officials, we tend to focus way too much on what happens between the lines on the field or on the floor. Take care of your crew. Gordon was all about what happens when you step off that field. What happens then? It's going to make you a better official. Again, get those mental health tune-ups, get the help you need if you need it. Things happen. And I think that's what elevates our community. That's what elevates us as officials is it's not about what we do in those 48 minutes or 60 minutes of a game. It's about what we're doing outside of it and the impact that we're making. And I know, sure, I can remember what game I officiated, what the score was sometimes, very few and far between, unless I have like a sign like the one behind me hanging on my wall. I don't really remember. But I remember the people I worked with. I remember the location. I remember the conversation that we had in the car afterwards. I remember going out for drinks after to celebrate a game, to celebrate someone else's game. Took the words out of my mouth about another thing I wanted to chat about is I've said it a million times as well, and I can count on every finger and toe and everything that I have officials that have said, well, this is my escape. This is my outlet. And escape from what? Outlet from what, right? It's a game is 60 minutes, or in high school, a lot of times 48 minutes, right? And, and it's 48 minutes. That's it. It's not a lot of time. There's a lot of space between the start of that game and the end of that game that you've got to still deal with your stuff. And I think one of the things that, I think Gordon sharing his struggles with mental health, I think people can also relate that at some point, everyone's going to have a tough day. Everyone's going to have a bad day. Everyone's going to have a bad week. Some people handle it differently than others, but people feel down, people do things. And I think like one of the biggest messages that I try to continue to spread is there's a million resources out there for folks to get help. So I watched these videos on YouTube, and this is back in 2011, 2012. So it's not like social media was a huge thing. It's not, content creators weren't like a huge thing at this point. And so I click on a couple of these links, and there's this guy with this deep Southern accent standing either in his driveway or in the middle of a field that didn't have a lacrosse goal on it, didn't have lines. And he was just talking about, each video was talking about a different aspect of officiating lacrosse. Some of it was what he packs in his game day bag, what he puts in the back of his car. Some of it was how to throw a flag. Some of it was just ridiculous. And we always gave him a hard time about it. And I love telling the one that really caught my eye was the one that he took a video of himself. And I think this was like one of his longer ones at 10, 15 minutes of him, how to take a hit as a lacrosse official. So lacrosse is a contact sport, but typically officials, we stay out of the way and we're not taking body contact and getting checked. But he wanted to try to keep people safe and teach them how to fall.
And now, Season 2, Episode 23, Letter T. Take care of your crew. Join hosts Dana Pappas and Nate Acosta with special guest Charlie Obermayer on the From A to Zebra podcast.
Welcome back to the From A to Zebra podcast. I'm Dana Pappas, back with my co-host Nate Acosta for this week's episode of the show.
This is a very special episode as we visit with a guest who will share a story about the letter T and the importance of the phrase, take care of your crew.
Our guest today is Charlie Obermayer. Charlie is an NCAA men's lacrosse official and the former senior manager of officials development for U.S. Lacrosse. He also worked the 2023 Men's World Championship in San Diego, California. Charlie is not only an advocate for lacrosse, but is a tremendous advocate for the profession of officiating.
Charlie, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining us. Before we get into the conversation of the day, would you please share with us your own officiating journey, how you got started, steps along the way, and what you are doing in officiating today?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dana. Thanks, Nate, for having me. Really glad to be here and been excited for this since I think we first connected a couple months ago about this. So I have it circled on my calendar and I'm glad to be here. And it's funny being in this seat and, just being an official now. I think Dana had mentioned I used to work for USA Lacrosse, overseeing all their officials education. So I was on the administrative side for years. But before that, I was just an official. And now I'm back to those grassroots as just an official, not sitting on any boards or anything. I started officiating when I was actually out in Arizona. I was going to Arizona State, decided that I wanted to stay involved in the sport out there. My best path to stay involved, I thought at the time, and still do, was officiating. So I signed up to officiate when I was 21 years old, and I've been officiating now for 20 years. And I started in youth lacrosse, and I loved it because it was the best job that a college kid could possibly have. I mean, I think at the time we were getting maybe 40, $50 for a youth game out there, and you do 2 or 3, and that's your Saturday money to go out and have some fun at night. And it was the best side job I could get. And I just had a lot of fun doing it. And I just got the bug bit me when I had it. So when I was out there, I started joining volunteer opportunities. I joined my officials association board out there. I joined USA Lacrosse as a volunteer, helping develop training and education materials. And that's what kind of led me to ultimately getting a career at USA Lacrosse for 10 years, where I oversaw all the officials' development and education across the country for just about 10 years. And that's where my paths crossed with a lot of great people, a lot of people, not just in the lacrosse world, but in sport and officiating. And again, every time I connected with someone that has worn the stripes, still wears the stripes, or is associated with the stripes in one way or another, and that could be as an administrator or something like that, their passion for officiating, their passion for making folks better, their passion for this job, this role that we have in sport is just, it's encouraging to me just to keep going, keep plugging along and doing it that way. I left USA Lacrosse a couple years ago, but I do still actively officiate at the college level. I have a 7-year-old little girl at home now, so officiating youth and high school is a little bit more challenging. So I haven't done as much of that as I'd hoped to the last couple of years, but still try to stay out on the field, stay active. And most recently, this past year, I joined World Lacrosse as their rules chairperson, overseeing all 4 rule disciplines and the process of updating and creating those rules across women's field, men's field, box lacrosse, and our new discipline, which is sixes lacrosse, which we're really excited about from World Lacrosse perspective, because that's going to be in the Olympics in Los Angeles in 2028. So it's a newer version of the game that we're going through, creating rules. We're creating officiating best practices for that discipline for the first time over the last decade. And it's kind of a cool thing to see, because a lot of times in sports, it's been developed already. It's just evolving. So that's been a fun aspect of this. And so, yeah, that's my officiating journey.
That's really cool. And I'm not at all surprised you got, you left US Lacrosse, but then they asked you to be on a board and you couldn't say no. I understand that all too well. Once you have the bug, people ask and you just end up doing. So I'm not surprised by that at all.
It's hard, right? Because it's something you love, and officiating is something that's given me. I say officiating, but then I also, because my specialty is lacrosse, the sport of lacrosse, and I think we all have probably a sport that we feel very closely tied to. But both officiating and both lacrosse, I tell people all the time, has literally given me everything in my life, right? Like it's helped me move across the country. It's helped me develop lifelong friends. It's helped me develop people that I consider family. It introduced me to my daughter's mother. And, without that, like, it's all lacrosse, it's all officiating, it's all this big pot of stuff that you look back at and you reflect on and you say, well, if I never put that whistle on when I was 21 years old and this dumb college kid at Arizona State, what would my life look like? I don't even want to know that answer, because I'm pretty happy with where I ended up right today. And to still have the opportunity to be out there officiating at the collegiate level is just it's a dream. I never would have thought I would be 20 years into an officiating career and journey like this.
That just reminds me of how young you were when I first met you. So now I feel old, but you were actually kind of funny. Being from New Mexico, we don't have lacrosse there. So you were the first lacrosse person I ever met in my entire life. And I was just always fascinated. I'm like, what's this lacrosse thing about? Because it's just not a sport we have there. So you were always anytime somebody said lacrosse, I thought of you. I was just like, I know a guy. So it was always good seeing you and getting to learn from each other, especially when it's sports that you don't have in your home, to be able to sit and talk to you and then realize just at the end of the day, it's just officiating. So there's, idiosyncrasies for each sport, but certainly it's all officiating and we can all have that common bond. So, you mentioned, as you were talking about kind of your officiating journey, the officiating family and the lifelong friends. And that really leads us into the purpose of this podcast. So We've done 50 episodes of the podcast to this point, and this one's a little bit different than the other 50. So on 51, we're trying something new, I think, but we're really jumping right until that to the phrase, which is the letter of the day, letter T, and take care of your crew, and the story of Gordon Corsetti. So last year at the NASO Summit, you had shared this story during the Referee Voices session. And really, we'd love for you to share with our listeners all that story. Who was Gordon? How you knew him, and how Take Care of Your Crew really came to be.
Yeah, so Gordon Corsetti is still and always was a very dear friend of mine. He was actually, I was thinking about this today, and I was young when I started working at US Lacrosse. I think I was in my late 20s at that point. And I was given the opportunity to oversee the officials education for both men's and women's lacrosse officials across the country. I needed to bring someone on to help me with the men's officials. Obviously, my background was in men's officiating. We already had a colleague that worked well with us, Liz Brush, and she was overseeing a lot of the women's officiating aspects, but we needed a men's official to kind of help take over that aspect. And we used to run these camps and clinics across the country where we would bring in veteran officials, kind of similar to other sports, and they would officiate either a youth or high school, some type of tournament over the summer, and get observed, assessed, and taught from top level, high level NCAA professional officials at these camps. The first time I ever crossed paths with Gordon was at one of these camps, and he stuck in my mind to the extent of, this kid's really young and he's a really good official and he really wants to get better. He's a total rules guy. And if he's going to be a really, really good official out of Georgia, which Georgia is another one of those places at the time that wasn't really considered the hotbed of lacrosse. So fast forward 6 or 7 months later, I had an opportunity at USA Lacrosse to bring someone on. And over those 6 months, people kept sending me these links and these videos to my email from YouTube. And it was from the Atlanta Youth Lacrosse League. I'm like, what is this? And so I watched these videos on YouTube, and this is back in 2011, 2012. So it's not like social media was a huge thing. It's not, content creators weren't like a huge thing at this point. And so I click on a couple of these links, and there's this guy with this deep Southern accent standing either in his driveway or in the middle of a field that didn't have a lacrosse goal on it, didn't have lines. And he was just talking about, each video was talking about a different aspect of officiating lacrosse. Some of it was what he packs in his game day bag, what he puts in the back of his car. Some of it was how to throw a flag. Some of it was just ridiculous. And we always gave him a hard time about it. And I love telling the one that really caught my eye was the one that he took a video of himself. And I think this was like one of his longer ones at 10, 15 minutes of him, how to take a hit as a lacrosse official. So lacrosse is a contact sport, but typically officials, we stay out of the way and we're not taking body contact and getting checked. But he wanted to try to keep people safe and teach them how to fall. So I'm watching this video, and there he is. No one's with him, and he's in the middle of this field, and he's pretending to get hit by a player, and he's rolling around in this field for like 10 minutes. And I was like, and it kind of flashed back to my first interaction with him. I was like, wow, this guy really goes above and beyond with his rules knowledge, with all of this. If we can just dial this back a little bit, we've got something really positive here. We've got something really great. Let's capture this. Let's harness this energy. As you guys know, in officiating, if you can find someone that's passionate about doing something, you want to grab it as quickly and you want to harness it as quickly as possible, because without that, education's not made, video's not made. We don't get better as officials. It's especially at the grassroots, the youth, high school level. It's a lot of volunteering. It's a lot of just putting in those times and those hours. So if you see someone, that's young, that's passionate, that's energetic about this, you gotta grab that bull by the horns and bring them into the fold. So had an opportunity to hire Gordon, brought him up to Baltimore, where our headquarters is located in Maryland. It was his first time living away from home, anything like that. I knew his father. His father's a great gentleman, been around the lacrosse world for a long time. Gordon came up and worked for me for a few years and just totally excelled, totally transformed what we were doing in officiating education. I think, selfishly speaking, not just for lacrosse, but for other sports as well, because we were taking what was traditionally done in officiating education at that time and really transforming it and modernizing it for the audience that we've been saying for as long as I've been around that we're trying to get into officiating. And that's the younger folks, not the, older folks like me, that are out there. We're trying to transition them off the field and out of the game in other capacity and get that younger generation in, because you have to be an athlete. You have to be in shape. So we were trying to develop something that piqued the interest of that new generation of officials to try to bring them in the fold. And Gordon was able to do that just by taking that energy that he had, doing all that stuff, rolling around on the grass field, and just capturing his passion for that and building out different content, and then giving him a vehicle from a national governing body standpoint to do that, and some extra resources that he didn't necessarily have when he was standing in the middle of the field in somewhere in Atlanta, Georgia. And so he really took it to the next level. And it was really exciting to see what we were able to do there. He was able to do there in that role and make that impact on lacrosse officials, but also other sports officials as well, because I know he helped out other groups in doing things like that. And yeah, and he came up and he was officiating. And so we got to work together in the office, but we also got to work together on the field. And those were some of my favorite moments with him. I really enjoyed working games with him. It was always an interesting time when he was on the field because he cared so much and his passion just leaked out of him on the field that sometimes you had to pull him back a little bit, let him take a deep breath. But man, he enjoyed, he was the definition of enjoying officiating and just wanting to be out there for the love of the game.
So, that's a really great setup. And I was fortunate enough to meet Gordon at one of the NASO summits when he spoke and kind of shared his story, which we'll get to in just a second. And then I also heard him speak at the Illinois State Officials Conference. He and I were both there, and we got to chat and kind of got to know each other. And I just remember in his vest, always like he was just dressed to a T and just had this personality about him. Like, there was something magnetic about him, and you just automatically liked him. Really engaging. When he spoke to you, he really heard you. It wasn't just somebody who was passively listening. He was an active listener and really cared about people and cared about officiating. He knew what my position was, and it wasn't about the position, it was about the passion. It was about two people who really loved officiating, and we were able to connect on that level. So appreciate you sharing kind of that background. So let's fast forward to how the foundation came to be. Take care of your crew. Kind of the it's emotional. I've heard this before, but it's something that I think is really important because it does tie right into the passion that he had and how much he loved officiating.
Yeah, so the take care of your crew, which I still have one of the original bracelets, was, as I mentioned earlier, we used to run all these camps and clinics across the country. And we always, as you do camps and clinics, you want to give the folks that are taking time away from their families, spending money to be there, committing to getting their being better at their craft of officiating. You want to give them some stuff. And so we would always do little knickknacks, little bags, hats, shirts, stuff like that, whatever was in the budget, which obviously, as you know, in officiating, that fluctuates a lot as well for some of these sports. And he had this idea to come up with this bracelet that was take care of your crew. And people loved it. And it just really resonated. And I think at the time, everyone made the assumption that take care of your crew as an officiating crew, okay, let's take care of each other out on the field. Let's make sure that we're all on the same page. Let's make sure anyone that put the bracelet on and still wears the bracelet today, their original thoughts were, this is about officiating. We were only looking at it from the lens of officiating and taking care of our folks on the field. Fast forward a couple years later, Gordon was brave enough to publish a story in Lacrosse magazine, which was later published in Referee magazine, and plus a couple other media outlets about, he shared his story about his battle with mental health for his entire life, which is probably one of my proudest moments of him, a friend of his, just seeing him be vulnerable and go out to share his struggles with mental health throughout his entire life, really, his young life. And if you talk to him, and Dana, as you mentioned, he was this personality that was this warm, embracing, caring, passionate person that you would never guess was dealing with all of these demons and these challenges behind the scenes. And it wasn't by design. He wasn't trying to hide it. It's just who he was as a person, because he cared so much about other people and helping them. And I go back to that video of him rolling around. In his brain, he was only trying to help someone else be better, not get injured, etc. We still use that. I do have to say, we still use that video today. Anytime, unfortunately, officials do get injured, if they get hit by a player or knocked down, that video is usually first up on the list going out via text message. So you should have watched the video, and we always get a good laugh of it. But so the take care of your crew really started there, was just take care of your crew as officials. As Gordon's story emerged and he started sharing it more often, I think some of us that were more close with him realized he meant something else with take care of your crew. He meant not just on the field, but off the field. And your crew is a lot more than just the people that you're wearing stripes on the field with. Your crew is the person sitting next to you at work. Your crew is the person that you go home to have dinner with every night, that you wake up to next in the morning. Your family that you might have not chatted with for a few months or even a few years, anybody, a friend that a college roommate, etc. That's your crew. Constantly thinking about what you can be doing to help someone else. In Gordon's article, one of the things that he mentioned, and this still lives with me to this day, and I call people out on this all the time, and I think we get very caught up sometimes in just the normal interaction, especially in this where we're still a very virtual first world. Even though we've gotten back to more in-person things, we're still a very virtual first world. And those interactions, those, hey, how are things going, how are you doing, tend to be very just inorganic, no weight to it. And Gordon said, and he would tell me, hey, sometimes the best thing to help him through his mental health issues was when someone just would ask, hey, how you doing? But you had to do it with some weight, with some passion and some caring and some empathy behind it, because you want that person to tell you how they're doing. And Gordon, if you ever met him and talked to him, you may have never met him in your entire life, but if he asked you how you were doing, within 2 seconds, you'd be willing to tell him all of your deepest, darkest secrets and tell him everything that you're dealing with in your world. He just had that aura, that energy about him that was, as you said, magnetic and just made you want to talk about things. And so I take that to this day, the hey, how are you doing, and keep that in the back of my mind of I better be ready for this answer. And I want them to also understand that I do care about how you're doing, and let's have a chat. What do you need? What do you need from me? And I think that's part of this take care of your crew, is it's so much broader than just what we're doing on the field. But I do think, and obviously this is an officiating podcast and an officiating audience primarily, that as officials, we can also do a better job of showing that empathy, having those conversations with our fellow officials. I can't count how many hours, days, months, years at this point I've spent in a car with another official driving to and from games. And what are we doing in that downtime? Oftentimes it might not hit you, but as you become closer with these friends and family of us as officials, you realize that those conversations do get deeper and deeper. How's things with your family? How's things with your daughter? How's things with your son? Hey, I saw your son's going to college. How's he doing in college? And you just talk to folks, and you very rarely, I find, are those conversations just specifically about officiating in lacrosse.
I mean, I think we spend more time off the field or playing surface than we do on the playing surface, because we're switching crews, we're with different people, and so when you do build those friendships, it's the barbecues and the family. So, I mean, yeah, we're talking about officiating, but I mean, we're talking so much deeper, and it is important to check in.
Yeah, you have to check in. And one of the things that when Gordon told me, hey, just check in and ask how you're doing, I tell people that all the time, hey, check in. And when I'm, a good example of this, and I'm not, I'm not perfect by any means, because I've struggled with asking folks how they're doing in different aspects and just being caught up in the moment and being kind of focused on, that little world that's around you and not thinking bigger picture. But one of the things I know when he ultimately died by suicide, and I had to tell my colleagues at work, and I work for Deloitte and consulting, and it's a very professional organization. The impact and the support from them obviously was tremendous. And I also knew at the time that I had this whole community of officials that were there to support me through the loss of a dear friend of mine, and the amount of phone calls and the amount of text messages. And so I told my team at work, I said, I appreciate you guys wanting to call and text me and ask me how I'm doing like daily. I'm not doing great, but I've got a million other people checking in on me right now. Do me a favor. Call someone that you haven't talked to in 6 months. Call someone that you haven't talked to in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, especially if you know that maybe they were going through a hard time. Maybe they were going through a divorce. Maybe they lost their job. Maybe they were going through some financial struggles. Maybe they were going through, struggling with maybe trying to step off the field or the floor, right? That's a issue with officials, is when that time comes. And that's a mental decision as much as it's a physical decision. Give them a call, ask them how they're doing, and just be ready to open yourself up and have that conversation with them, because you never know. You never know that what they're struggling with, and they might not have anybody to ask them that question. And that might be the only thing they need, is just someone to ask them that question. And that can help them get through that day. That can help them get through that week. It can help them turn the page to another one. And yeah, so I think that's a very long-winded where Take Care of Your Crew is. And it's been fun because it's now taken on a whole new meaning, but also a new life of its own. Gordon also had a tattoo on his wrist of a semicolon from Project Semicolon, which basically means, your sentence hasn't ended. And to me, that always spoke to me as, well, Gordon's message is going to continue. We're going to continue wherever we can this Take Care of Your Crew theme. In my basement, I have like a box of like thousands of them. So if you guys need any, just let me know and I'd be happy to send them out to you to share with your officials. And we've been handing them out the last few years at different lacrosse world championships. And so it's been fun. The U20 world championships were just in South Korea this past 2 weeks. And I know officials out there were all wearing them. And it's always kind of surreal when you turn on a game and you watch and you see, someone wearing this Take Care of Your Crew bracelet. I've seen SEC football officials wearing them. I've seen NFL officials wearing them. I've seen, just from people handing them out. I was like, I wonder how that person got that. And, it's fun to see because it's important. And I think it resonates. I think that message, Take Care of Your Crew, resonates with everyone who's worn stripes in one point or another.
It sure does. And I think, the message of Take Care of Your Crew, and you had given me a bracelet last year, and I do wear it because it is such an important message. And when you're talking about asking somebody, how are you doing? I'm very well known in our office for I'll ask somebody, how are you doing? And they'll go, oh, I'm fine. And I'm like, no, how are you doing? And when you ask it with that, like in that way, like it's not a passing, hey, how you doing? I actually care. Like I want to know how you're doing. And like you said, you got to be ready because somebody's going to open up to you. But I think that just that empathy toward others and being able to recognize when somebody might be a little bit off. And in Gordon's case, you wouldn't have known. And unless you knew, you wouldn't have known. And Charlie, I think I had shared this with you when Gordon and I were reconnected, I guess, at the Illinois State Officials Conference. We were going to start working on some mental agility stuff for officials. And we had exchanged emails back and forth. And one day he goes, I just need to step away from it. And then I found out about his death, like it was probably a month and a half later. And I think I had messaged you on Facebook at the time, but you had kind of shared that story about finding out how that all happened. Do you mind sharing that with our listeners?
Yeah.
From your perspective?
Absolutely. And, again, you never know, right? That, you can only speculate because we're never going to get those answers. But the morning that I'm going to probably lose it here because it's still.
As might I. So
the morning we were at our weekend long NCAA meeting for officials that we do annually, where we do our rules interpretation, we do our clinics and sessions to prepare for the lacrosse season. And we do that at the end of December or the beginning of December every year. And so and it's always, as you know, with those events, it's always a blast because sometimes that's the only time you get to see folks because you might not get a game with them that upcoming year, especially in college NCAA lacrosse, where we have 1,000 men's officials that span from California to Maine. You're not working with them, but you know them and you've been acquaintances with them. You've gone to clinics with them. You're friends with them. You've chatted with them. So we're all in this hotel together. And that morning I was rooming with one of my best friends who was also one of Gordon's mentors, and we were very close. He's in the Baltimore area. We happened to be in the room. We were getting ready to head down for breakfast, and I had a missed call from Gordon's dad, Lou. And it's usually not he would call every once in a while, but it's not something that he would call all the time. And I had missed it. And then 10 seconds later, my friend Kevin was sitting there and we were drinking coffee and his phone rings and it's Gordon's dad, Lou. And we both just looked at each other and we knew. And it was the most probably surreal experience of my officiating career, being in that room around all those people, having to share the news to the group at the end of the day. Although obviously people started to know as the day progressed. It's a very difficult time. And obviously our leaders of NCAA lacrosse, I told them right away that morning. We broke the news to them. They'd all known Gordon, obviously, for his contributions. First thing, hey, go home, get out of here, do what you need to do. I wasn't leaving. There was no way.
Absolutely not.
Because what was I going to do? I was going to go home and sit by myself. And that was the worst place to be at that point. So something drew, and I think that's just the power of officiating. That's the power of this family that we have as officials, is even in the darkest of moments, it was the only people that I could picture and wanted to be around in that moment was my officiating family. And that day was hard. It was brutal. It was brutal. But I tell you what was worse, when I got home that night and I was by myself, and then you actually have a moment to think about what just happened and what's next. What are we doing next? It was something that, having known that he had battled with this for a long time, I'd hate to say that you almost start to expect you're maybe going to get that phone call someday and you almost don't want it, but it was definitely that case at certain points. Not always, not all the time, but at certain points when I knew when he was struggling and he was battling with his stuff, that, oh boy, this one seems bad. But you look at the positives that he brought, and you look at the impact that he continues to make, and his stories continue to be sold. His ridiculous videos when he was 20 something years old are still up on Atlanta. We told his mom that she can never delete that YouTube thing. She better never take those down because they're there's too many. It's him. It's just him. And it's and his website is, and his family is carrying on his work and with mentally agile. His dad is doing a lot of work. His dad has kind of carried on his core torch of writing some articles on the blog on his site, sharing some of their experiences of how it's been from their aspect of losing a son, which I couldn't even fathom. They continue to do some memorial tournaments. They continue to partner with other mental health nonprofits to spread the message and help support in any way. So it's sad about how his life ended, but it's a semicolon, and his sentence is not ending, and his message and his story continues. It's amazing to this day. The people that talk about Gordon and didn't know him, but now, they hear his story and they go on. And I was just on his website today, and he's got some officiating articles on there about prepping for a game. And I'm like, this is great. I forgot about these. And I read them this morning because I was just trying to catch up and get up to speed again and get my brain back in this world. And I was like, oh, there's a link for officials on here. What is that? And, just not remembering. And, there were some great articles on there about, how to prep for a game and how to deal with when you have a tough game and all of those things. So he continues to give.
Absolutely.
First and foremost, like, thank you for telling his story and continuing that story. I think that it's probably not easy, and it's one of those things, but I think that you said it. I mean, his story continues. So, we don't talk enough about mental health and mental health advocacy. On this podcast, I know that we brought it up a few times actually, and it's coming up more and more. And I think as officials, we spend a lot of time trying to show this face that we have it all together and we know the rules and we know the mechanics and we're in the right position and we're unbiased and we're professionals and deep down, some of us do have things going on in life that we don't talk about. And a lot of times officiating is our outlet and then that's what we do. Um, but you said it. When it's all said and done, you got to go home, by yourself and with your thoughts. And so, it's important, for our listeners. I mean, it's important when you're on that 2 hour in that car for 2 hours, to really, just check in with your crew, take care of the crew. Man, it's just there's so much, and so yeah, first, yeah, thank you. I mean, it can't be easy. You did mention something about the Gordon Corsetti Mental Agility Foundation. That's something, what is it? Where can we find links? And the biggest thing is, how can we donate to this or how can we assist in continuing Gordon's sentence?
Yeah, and just to hit on what you had said, I think, and you took the words out of my mouth about another thing I wanted to chat about is I and I've said it a million times as well, and I can count on every finger and toe and everything that I have officials that have said, "Well, this is my escape. This is my outlet." And escape from what? Outlet from what? Right? It's a game is 60 minutes, or in high school, a lot of times 48 minutes, right? And it's 48 minutes. That's it. It's not a lot of time. There's a lot of space between the start of that game and the end of that game that you've got to still deal with your stuff. And I think one of the things that, I think Gordon sharing his struggles with mental health, I think people can also relate that at some point everyone's going to have a tough day. Everyone's going to have a bad day. Everyone's going to have a bad week. Some people handle it differently than others, but people feel down, people do things. And I think like one of the biggest messages that I try to continue to spread is there's a million resources out there for folks to get help at. If you're not comfortable talking to your family, if you're not comfortable talking with your friends that wear stripes, I get it. We get it. It's okay. There's a million different avenues out there for you to get help. There's hotlines, there's free. Most companies now have some type of mental health well-being. I know I'm very lucky with my company. They pay for mental health aspects of things, and it's been a great resource. I've used it constantly. And I joke and said, I just need I need a tune-up. I need a little mental tune-up. And, just like we deal with our bodies, just like we go to the gym to exercise, just like we prepare for the seasons that we're going to officiate by reading the rule book, by, stretching, by doing all of these things to get us ready. We do also have to take care of our mental health as well, because if you're struggling, and I know I've had a bad day or a bad week, or I've been struggling with things, and I know my performance out on the field at those times has not been 100%. And it's always going to be hard to get to 100%, and we're never going to do it as an official, but we try to strive to get there as close. And as you said, we try to be that professional. We try to be buttoned up. We try to have that composure and face. And meanwhile, sometimes that's a lot of pressure, and if you're dealing with a lot of stuff off the field and off the court, you've really got to make sure you're fine tuning your mental health aspects. And that could be in a lot of different ways. That could be just going for a walk. That could be talking to someone, talking to a professional. I'm not saying you need to call 988, the suicide hotline, although, obviously that's a huge valuable resource that was released a handful of years ago. It's great to have. And there's a million things out there, and there's a million people out there that are dealing with all this stuff. So you're not like,
And it's okay not to be okay.
yes,
It's truly okay not to be okay. We don't have to pretend that we're not okay, and that's okay.
And I think
yeah,
that, just being able to destigmatize mental health, issues is huge, because for so long it was just people were almost embarrassed to talk about the fact that they were struggling. And, I've dealt with depression, anxiety myself, and being able to share that story was therapeutic. It was cathartic for me to be able to talk about all the things I was going through, and then relating it back to officiating of I was able to get through it because of my officiating family, because I had this family of people from across the country who lifted me up in a time where I felt kind of just defeated. And I think that being able to share, you know, my struggles, Nate's struggles, your struggles, what Gordon went through, I think that that only strengthens us as a community because you have to have this conversation. You have to talk about it. Officiating is difficult, and there's a mental strain that comes from it that you do have to get those tune-ups, and that is absolutely great. I mean, you want to be in shape for the season, and that includes your mind as well. So I think that being able to have these conversations, and one of the reasons we really wanted to have you on the podcast was to be able to talk about this in depth, and it is emotional, and I know it was hard to share that, and I appreciate you, sharing it, but you're doing it because of that semicolon and because of really carrying on Gordon's legacy.
You said something that kind of, I mean, just like we work out in the off season, I can tell you personally that the hardest time for me is in the off season, because, I mean, being fully transparent on this podcast, officiating is my outlet. And when the end of March, when April comes, and my season's over, now I have to get back into my regular work schedule, and now all those things that I've been running from, for 4.5 months, now I have to come back. And so that's where, just like the off season training, I have to work on that mental health. And uh, talk to people and get the help that's needed, because that off season is long. It's really long. And it's funny because there are times that, it's during the season, it's like, oh, what, I'm good,
You're just
and
going through the motions,
you're
right?
just
You're
going
just
through the
going.
motions and you're good. And then you get to the off season and it's that seasonal depression, right? It's that, most people get it during the winter months when they're stuck inside. Well, that's not the case for a basketball official, right? But it's okay. But it's the exercise. Continue to get in shape for your games, physically and, most important, mentally.
Absolutely. So, you've touched on a little bit about this, Charlie, but what are some things that you remember the most about Gordon, and what do you wish other people who didn't have the honor of meeting him knew about him?
I mean, we've touched on his just warmth and generosity, and I think like ultimately, like I do know when he was first starting to decide whether or not he was going to share his story in a magazine that goes to 250,000 members, and then plus the audience of having it go out and referee. I mean, that's pretty bold, right? That's not just bold, that's brave. And that alone, I can't even imagine. And I talked to him during this time, obviously, as we were going through the process of him telling his story and trying to get it written and everything like that. I just couldn't imagine, right? Like what was going on in his head and how I know I would have been absolutely terrified. Absolutely terrified. I don't think I would have been brave enough to do it. Honestly, I'll say that. I think just that how brave he was to share that story, and then to realize that his appreciation for lacrosse and officiating, but his love for people and helping them get through things was so much bigger than, which is hard to believe because he loved officiating. He loved lacrosse. Um, but his genuine care for other people is what drove him to really spread this message. And not many people also realize that after he left working for US Lacrosse, he actually went into work in a trade. He went to go work as a linesman. So he went through linesman
Right.
school. Um, which if you think officials are rough around the edges, linesmen, they're a tough bunch. That's a tough group. They are, I mean, they're climbing poles, dealing with electricity. That's,
Tough
it's
job.
a tough job. Storm work, it's a tough job. And so, and he went into that and immediately started telling people about what he was dealing with and what he was trying to do and what his larger mission in his life was to continue to help spread that message of mental health awareness and suicide and depression and those things. And and you think these, you know big huge linemen folks that are climbing these poles and doing all this work, they're probably the least to open up, but you wouldn't believe how people would open up to him and share their stories with him. And I think he made the world a better place, not just in the officiating, but in that world as well. And so he bridged a lot of different kind of audiences, and I was just really happy to see the work that he was doing, and he found a passion for it, using his story as a jumping off point, but then focusing really on the tools that people can use is really what he strove for.
And that when you just said he made the world a better place, I probably in total spent around 2 hours around Gordon and exchanged emails with him. But the impact he made on me just in that short time, that says so much about the quality of his character and his ability to really affect change and get into your heart. Like he was just so genuine. I will never forget meeting him and just the warmth of his handshake. It was just those things that when you meet someone and you're just like, this person's special. Like you may not even understand why in that moment, but he definitely had that about him, and he did make the world a better place. He still is. He's not with us, but he's with us. Like I just think that the fact that he's continuing to affect all of us in this way, and I'm glad that you're on this so that we can share his story and have more people affected by his story. And I remember reading the article that had been published, and that took so much courage because it was just as vulnerable as you could possibly be, and that takes so much strength that he may not have even known he had the strength to do that. So it was an incredible article. Glad I was able to read that too.
And I know one of my other moments that I was probably I was like a proud older brother. I always kind of started considering myself like an older brother to him. Was in Spokane actually when the summit was out there that one summer, and he was a guest speaker for Referee Voices. And I think that was the third or fourth year that session was happening, and I was always privileged enough to be emceeing that session. Having kind of been involved with that session since it was created at the summits each summer, and hearing all of those really impactful stories from officials that were, and most of them, I think, that went before Gordon to tell their story were these officials that you would, from an officiating world, they are the pinnacle of officiating, right? Wearing stripes. They had refereed multiple Super Bowls. They had done FIFA World Cups. They had done WNBA championships. They had done all of these like incredible things. The best part about I always thought the Referee Voices session was it talked about the stuff off the court as well. And in that session, I think he was last to go, and I got to introduce him. And usually after that session is over, people are applauding, clapping, doing something, saying great job, rah rah. The story tends to end with a positive note. That room was silent
It
when
was.
Gordon shared his. And it was probably one of the most impactful things I've ever been around. Just seeing that room, knowing who the audience is in that room, and their jaws just on the floor after listening to his story and what he was trying to do. And he even did, I believe, tried to wrap it up with a positive,
He did.
somewhat
I remember
positive.
that.
But it was so impactful for folks to hear the struggles that he had dealt with. And I think it resonates with people because at some point we've all struggled. Everyone's had a struggle, and the struggle's going to be different. But I think what he was trying to tell people was that's okay. That's okay. And then here's some tools to help you get through it, because there's a lot of different pathways to do that.
And I remember that session because everybody was just kind of looking at each other and teary-eyed. That's happened a couple of times when you spoke about Gordon. It happened again, but I think that to have a room that's just in almost like a stunned silence, that's what happened. All of us were just like, holy smokes. And you're right, he did try to kind of end on a positive, but all of us were still like, nope, not ready for that.
Not ready for that, yeah.
That was just who he was. But that was so impactful. And then your story about him last year was just because those of us who had heard him speak, it was just that came back to us all over again. So really, really incredible.
Last year was a full circle kind of moment.
Sure
I felt
was.
like especially since I had been away from that summit for a few years, and it felt good getting back with that, again, friends and family that I hadn't seen in a few years, and being able to talk about him in that avenue as well as this one. It's as you said earlier, like I have a difficult time saying no to things, and this is one of those that, like, if someone asks, I never hesitate to talk or share Gordon's message, because I know it helped me. It's helped me through some tough times. He continues to help me, and if he can help one person out there, then I think he's considering that a success. We're all considering that a success, and there's plenty more people out there that maybe we can impact across the world. I know you asked earlier about where his site is, where you can go and donate and things like that. So his website's mentallyagile.com. If you go on there, there's all of his speeches that he had done that he recorded are up there. He was an avid writer. He loved writing and reading. He was very well read as well. So he was very smart and intelligent in that way. He did a ton of research on different things. So his website is a great spot to just get information, also learn a little bit about Gordon. There's opportunities on there to donate. His family's still doing some fundraisers. They're giving scholarship to folks to go to linesman school, because that's a cost. So yes, it's a great job getting out of linesman school, but also the cost to go to linesman school can be a little cumbersome for those folks. And through Gordon's charity, that they're trying to also raise mental health awareness, but also provide opportunities for more linesmen to enter that trade.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and his dad continues to write on there. I think his dad just posted an article a couple weeks ago. Him and his mom did a tour to the Dakotas to do a lacrosse clinic, because they're a lacrosse family. They love it. And on the way back, they made a couple cool stops, but they also, as with anything, and as I can only imagine, Gordon's never too far from their mind. So he was sharing a little bit about Gordon's impact, and I believe that the tournament or the play day that they had to teach people how to play lacrosse in the Dakotas had a take care of your crew sign made for them and stuff like that. So just really cool opportunities for his family to continue spreading his message as well. So
Thank you for that.
Yep. We close out our podcast the same way every week, and we're going to change it a little bit, which is appropriate to what we just talked about. What can you tell us and our audience about Gordon Corsetti and about taking care of our crews that helps to elevate the officiating community?
So think about this for a second. So it elevates the officiating community because it's beyond. I think we've talked about this a little bit tonight, but I think as officials, we tend to focus way too much on what happens between the lines, on the field or on the floor. Take care of your crew. Gordon was all about what happens when you step off that field. What happens then? It's going to make you a better official. Again, get those mental health tune-ups, get the help you need if you need it. Things happen. And I think that's what elevates our community. That's what elevates us as officials. Is it's not about what we do in those 48 minutes or 60 minutes of a game. It's about what we're doing outside of it and the impact that we're making. And I know, sure, I can remember what game I officiated, what the score was. Sometimes very few and far between, unless I have like a sign like the one behind me hanging on my wall. I don't really remember. But I remember the people I worked with. I remember the location. I remember the conversation that we had in the car afterwards. I remember going out for drinks after to celebrate a game, to celebrate someone else's game. They had a championship. Let's go watch the game, and let's go meet out. Let's go have some wings with them afterwards. And I remember those moments. And I think that's what Gordon does and continues to do, is elevating us off the floor, off the field, outside the lines. I think, again, we as officials, we tend to get very, very focused on what happens, because that's what we can control, right? We can control typically what happens between the lines. But sometimes when we step off the field, it's hard, right? As you said, when you get to that off season, you're like, man, I had so much control over those 60 minutes. And now I can't even microwave my dinner. Not saying you can't microwave your dinner, but
He's like, oh,
Pretty accurate.
how'd you know?
How did you? Wow.
Officiating, I think, in the grand scheme of things, is easy compared to just trying to navigate through life sometimes. And I think that's what Gordon was trying to help with, is help with people that were in this field, but he wanted to help them. He wanted to help them off the field because that was what was most important to him.
That's incredible. Charlie, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing Gordon's story. I think this will be great for our listeners to be able to hear that. And I know how close you were with him, and being able to share him and carry on his legacy with us, with all of us. Really appreciate that. And, personally, I just want to say thank you. You're my first lacrosse friend, and I'm just a fan of yours, as you know, and I'm so grateful that we've been able to kind of reconnect after the summit last year, and I'll be better at checking in on you. So when I ask how you're doing, it's okay for you to tell me. But I
hope that you've broadened your horizon of lacrosse officials beyond just me, because that's not a good place to be if it's just me.
I don't know.
There's so many others out there.
You're familiar, so it's okay. But I just appreciate everything you do for officiating. I appreciate your friendship, and I appreciate what you do for lacrosse, but the overall officiating community. And I'm so glad you were back at NASO last year, because I hadn't seen you in like 100 years, and being able to reconnect has been awesome. So I'll do a better job of keeping in touch now that I know where to find you, and certainly. Well, thank you so much for being on the show and for sharing Gordon's story. It's important, it's powerful, it's emotional, and it's something worth hearing.
Thank you both for having me.
Yep. Charlie, thank you. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on the From A to Zebra podcast. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, X, and for more information about the show. And remember, it's okay not to be okay. And we'll see you next time.
Take care of your crew.
See you guys.
Be sure to hit that like button, follow, subscribe, and also catch From A to Zebra on Instagram at from_A_2_zebra, Facebook From A to Zebra podcast, and on X at From A to Zebra.